Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. You can really help the show reach more loss and infertility families by taking a moment to leave a positive review or rating on Apple or Spotify. Check us out on Patreon for exclusive bonus content. Just go to patreon.com/Finding Hope After Loss. You can also check out more information about the episode in the show notes at journeyforjasmine.com. I wanted to take a moment to share about an amazing thing I recently found that helps keep track of all of your important moments and memories in a very unique way. Ash and Dust Woodworks has created a memory ring where you can customize the important things that happen each year. Just as tree rings show growth in a tree, these memories show the growth of you as a person, a family, a business, or whatever else you want it to represent. There are several customization options, and you can continue to add on rings as your journey continues. Check out the link in the show notes for the Ash and Dust Kickstarter campaign. You definitely don't want to miss out on getting one of your own. Today, I am talking with Jen. She is a mother of two, including her baby who was stillborn at 37 weeks, and her living rainbow baby. In this episode, she talks about the importance of being educated on fetal movement and the support that lost parents need both during and after a pregnancy or infant loss. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Jen. Jen, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Of course, Sarah, I'm so thankful to be here. I'm so thankful to spend this time with you and with the listeners. I am a mom, first and foremost, to two children, one who lives in heaven and one who lives in my arms. My first son, baby Rogalski, was stillborn at 37 weeks in April of 2023. And my second son is my living son, Drew. He was born in June of 2024. Other than being a mom, I also have a dog, a beautiful husband, and we live in Massachusetts. We do experience all four seasons, and it is fun when we can get outside and play. And we like to be in our garden and outside. And other than that, I work 15 hours per week for a nonprofit that specifically supports moms and parents or all people, bereaved people surrounding pregnancy and infant loss. And prior to that, I was an executive assistant at Mass General Hospital. So I kind of hung up my corporate hat when my baby passed away to work strictly in the nonprofit world of supporting other bereaved parents. And when I'm not dedicating my time to the parents of this organization, I do a lot of advocacy work. So first and foremost, I'm a mom and I parent both of my children equally. I know that's really kind of odd to understand for a lot of people, but I parent both my living and my son who passed away equally. Just when I parent my living son, it's very obvious. I'm riding around, running around, chasing him on his balance bike and doing those kinds of things and dropping him off and picking him up. And when I parent my child who passed away, it's through going to the Massachusetts State Capitol and advocating for maternal health. And it's through talking to other bereaved parents, whether that's a coffee over just listening to someone who really recently experienced the loss. I count those hours as parenting my son who lives in heaven.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people who have never been through loss don't understand that we do still parent our children, even if they aren't here. And just like you said, it just looks different, but it doesn't mean that we're not still their parent and still trying to actively parent them.
That's right. Every day in some way.
Yeah. So, do you mind sharing a little more about your loss?
Of course. So baby Rogalski was a very welcomed pregnancy, but a surprise. He crashed our wedding. My husband and I were married in August of 2022, and I was 6 weeks pregnant at my wedding, and only like a handful of people knew under this big white tent. It was so awesome that we had this little secret. So he crashed our wedding, and then we had an awesome pregnancy. My honeymoon, he tagged along at an all-inclusive where I was not drinking, and that was a bummer, but of course, a very, very fun experience. We had a 20-week ultrasound that we learned that baby Rogalski and I shared what's called a single artery umbilical cord or a two vesicle cord. So one artery, one vein. It's typical to have two arteries and one vein. And I didn't know that. But I was assured at the time that this is a variation of normal. This can happen. The baby looks great. Everything is great. You don't need to see MFM. You don't need additional monitoring. Well, we will keep a close eye on you, but baby looks great. And so that was my 20-week anatomy scan. So a little bit of a red flag. And then moving right along, around 32 to 33 weeks, his amniotic fluid started to decrease. So it was, I think the normal range of amniotic fluid is like 5 to 20, and don't quote me on that. We were always hanging around a 10, and then it dipped to a 9, and then the next week it dipped to an 8, and then the next week we never made it to our ultrasound. So we did have a red flag that his amniotic fluid was a bit off. But again, I felt great. I passed my diabetes test with flying colors. I don't have any, when you look at my medical history, there's no reason why I should have been marked a high risk pregnancy. So I wasn't. And what I want to share is that 3 days before baby R, we learned that baby R didn't have a heartbeat. I did feel a definite change in his fetal movements. And so now I speak very loudly about monitoring fetal movements during pregnancy because yes, I was aware that his fetal movements had changed, but I jumped on Google and it said babies can run out of room, which is clearly very, very wrong. I want to highlight that is very, very wrong. And I said to my husband, who had been at every single one of my prenatal appointments, thankfully, I feel very lucky that he was at every single one. I said to him, I'm just not feeling the baby move quite as much. And he said, something along the lines of, I'm sure we're just getting close. Like, this is great. And we went along our day. That was a Thursday. And of course, I remember these days picture perfect, right? So I know that was a Thursday that I said that to my husband. I went off to work in the city. Like I said, I was working as executive assistant, really busy. And by Sunday, I didn't feel my baby moving at all. And I called the doctor. We went in and they did a ultrasound where the nurse did confirm the I can't find a heartbeat. I believe your baby has passed away. I'm going to go get the doctor now. So we learned that he had no heartbeat at a non-scheduled ultrasound in labor and delivery at the hospital where I was planning to deliver. But we ended up going home that evening and scheduled an induction for a few days later. It just felt like the best thing for us to do at the time. And truthfully, my induction was very, very smooth. My labor process was very smooth. The hospital took excellent care of me. Unfortunately, though, baby R had already passed away very peacefully. And so we didn't, we got to meet him, hold him, take pictures with him. And then 12 hours later, we were back home in our car driving, with an empty car seat back to our home. So it was really, really traumatizing. And at the same time, the actual hospital experience wasn't traumatizing, if that makes sense. It wasn't a horrible hospital experience, which I know a lot of parents do have. So I feel fortunate in that sense. But the one thing that I do feel I was lacking was this education on fetal movement. And the reason I mentioned that my husband, I feel fortunate that he was in every appointment. I believe if he had heard or we had heard, if there are any changes in your fetal movement, you need to rush straight to labor and delivery. Your baby could be in distress. Your baby could die. I think we just didn't know that at 37 weeks, a baby could die. A really healthy, good looking little boy. We just didn't know that that could happen. So between my husband and I, we will forever carry this guilt and this hard fact that if we had da 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 for the rest of our lives, and that's really, really tough mentally and physically to get through. So I think that's all I want to share about Baby R. We love him so much, and we had his ashes turned into a diamond, which I think is unique. I did not feel it was the right thing for me to have his ashes in an urn sitting in my home, just because the simple fact my husband and I travel a lot. And I wanted him to come everywhere we went as if he was my living son and would have come everywhere we went. And so there was a Shark Tank episode where they featured a company that turns ashes into diamonds. So we actually did that. It was a year-long process. And now we have his diamond. It's set in a ring that I wear on my hand every day. And he comes everywhere with us. And he's definitely part of our family. We speak about him and include him in, holidays and big events and big days. But he's so, so very missed.
I think that is so cool. I've actually never heard of like ashes being able to be turned into a diamond. Did
Yeah.
you have to send, I mean, just out of curiosity, did you have to send like
Yeah.
all the ashes or is it just a small amount or how do they do
This
that?
is a really great question, and I love to talk about it because I am also the only person who I know who has done this. Actually, that's not true. As of last week, I saw one other mom on Instagram who did use the same company that I used for her daughter. But I believe her daughter was a living child. Not that, baby R was living, but I think her daughter might have been too. So what happens with this process is this company, it's called Eternova. They send you a package, and inside of that, it's like a beautiful, like really, really elegant box. Inside the box is a collection container for ashes, and they ask you to measure out a certain amount of ashes because they do use adult ashes and baby or even pet ashes, that it's a certain amount that you measure. For baby R, for babies, I didn't know this, but babies make about a cup of ashes, a full-term baby. And so that's exactly what they needed to create his diamond. So I did send 100% of his ashes.
Wow. I mean, saying that like that they make a cup, like it's so like sobering. Like
Yeah,
your baby is just, I mean,
there.
you can
Yes.
visualize like how much that
Yeah.
is and it's like, wow, that's all
And
that's left, you know?
And here's a visual, Sarah. I took this package that Eternova sent to me. I packaged up his ashes in it and I handed it over to a FedEx worker. Like, just picture I doodled all over this box. I love you. Like, take care of this box, extra special with literal like magic markers. And I was like, please, please take extra special care of this package. And then the company, as soon it was overnighted, and as soon as they received it, they actually send a picture of the box and they say, we've got it. It's in safe hands. So it felt really good. But for 24 hours, it was like, where are my baby's ashes in this world? Like, what a bizarre thought that I
It is.
never thought that I would ever think about ever in my whole life.
And then you're over here like, please don't lose this package. Please don't like lose somebody else's package today, please.
Yeah, right? Not mine, not this one. This
Yeah.
one's extra special.
But I do
So,
love that the company like sends you an actual picture. I mean, it's
yeah,
they realize the importance of every
yeah,
package that they're receiving.
that's right. And they ask you to include a photo of your loved one. And so that I thought that was really special too, so that every person who was assisting with creating this diamond would know that there was a real love story behind it. It's not just, a cup of ashes.
Yeah, that's super cool. I'm so
So
glad that
cool.
you brought that up because, like I
Yeah,
said,
me
I've
too.
never heard about it. So that's really cool to know that that's an available option.
Yeah. Yes. Who knew?
So I know you talked about it a little bit about the reduced movement and everything.
Mhm.
Were you ever told by doctors that babies run out of room? I mean, I know you read it online, but like, is
Mhm.
that something that like doctors ever told you about late pregnancy?
No, I don't think so. What I do know is I never heard the word stillbirth throughout my pregnancy with baby R. Obviously, with Drew, I heard it 100 times. But with baby R, I didn't. What I was told was make sure your baby is kicking every every night before you go to bed. Make sure your baby is kicking. And baby R kicked every night up until the day when I didn't feel him at all. So if you it was on a Thursday that I said to my husband, I'm just not feeling him as much. On Friday, I'm just not feeling him as much, but I was always feeling him somewhat. And then on Saturday, I definitely felt him kick and I closed my eyes. And the next morning I woke up and I didn't feel anything. So I think the education that I received was incorrect because it was make sure you feel your baby moving. And I felt baby are moving every day. So I wasn't necessarily told, babies run out of room and it's normal. I didn't call. I know that there are some parents who do call their labor and delivery unit and they're told, just drink a glass of cold water. The baby is fine. And they're kind of hush hushed. For me, I never called because my provider had said, just make sure your baby's kicking every day. And I was like, check, he's kicking. But I definitely knew there was a decrease in his movements.
It's so hard though, because we feel a lot of doctors make you feel like, oh, you're a first time mom, you especially if it's your first baby. So, you're a first time mom, you're worried about everything, you're worrying too much. And then so then you're like, well, do I call? Do I not call? Like,
Mhm.
when's it important? When's it not? And they don't really, not all doctors do a good job of educating on that, like
A
talk
million
about.
times. And I think it's really important that I acknowledge the healthcare system is just so stressed. So for a provider to sit down and say, there's a risk of stillbirth, there's a risk of like 100 lists. I understand that that's not truly possible, but it is possible to keep a pamphlet on the door of every OB's office that says something along the lines of monitor your baby's fetal movements. A sign of increase or decrease is a problem. And don't call, come straight to labor and delivery.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
that
no,
needs to
I
be the
agree.
message. It's like a in my mind, it's a postcard that just says increased movements, decreased movements, straight to labor and delivery.
And I feel like sometimes doctors don't want to like talk about that because they don't want to
Yeah.
scare moms or they don't, but then when you're the one who's in the situation, then you don't know what to do because
Yes.
nobody has ever talked to you. And like
Yes.
you, I'm trying to think, I don't really think I knew about stillbirth. I mean, I thought,
Mhm.
okay, I'm past 12 weeks, I'm good.
Same.
And then, it
Same.
didn't happen like that. And
Yeah.
so then we're kind of caught between not wanting to scare everybody and
Yeah.
not having anybody be prepared when they're the one who has that happen.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that scare for a moment because I'm active on social media on my personal page just when I can. And usually it's on Wednesdays. Baby R was born on a Wednesday. I post education about fetal movements or about stillbirth or about the fact that, every pregnant person in America knows not to eat unpasteurized cheese and eat deli meat sandwiches. But what's the data behind that? It's actually not as strong as anyone thinks. But there are 21,000 babies stillborn every year. So why don't we know about stillbirth and fetal movements when we do know about mosquito bites and deli meat sandwiches? It just seems a little backwards to me. So those are the kinds of things that I post on my social media. And I know people have reached out to me and said, I'm really thankful that you posted this because I went to labor and delivery and got checked out, Jen. And the baby was born early and they induced me. And the baby's here safe now because of that. And so that makes me feel really, really, for all the times that I feel anxious about posting that I'm going to scare someone, it feels 10,000 times better that there potentially was a benefit to that baby who's here safely.
I think that's amazing that you've heard those stories. I mean, that you
Yeah.
have helped people, even if it's just one person,
Yeah.
then that's
Yeah.
one less stillborn baby.
Yeah. Could be potentially stillborn, could be perfectly fine. We don't know, but I do know that they're here safely.
Yeah.
It's been 5, and I'm like, I love those little babies just, so much.
So I know that you weren't familiar with stillbirth, but did you know anybody else who had been through like miscarriage or other types of loss before you went through your
Yeah,
loss?
I did. A close friend of mine had 4 miscarriages and was going through IVF when she became pregnant with her now living son. And she actually got pregnant naturally with, no IVF cycles. And that little boy is truly a miracle. So I knew about infertility and miscarriages through her, but I didn't quite understand the scope. And I don't think unless you're part of this really horribly sad club with the best people, you don't understand. Like a miscarriage could mean that this is graphic, but that you go to the bathroom and you're holding, a 2-inch baby in your bathroom. And now you have to live in that bathroom for the rest of your life. And, who do you even call to tell that this is an experience that you had? Where's the support? Where's so while I think we're coming around, quote unquote, like more and more people are talking about miscarriage and about stillbirth and pregnancy and infant loss, and truly pregnancy loss. Infant loss is separate, I think, in this discussion. It just wasn't talked about, I don't think, as much, in 10 years ago as it is now because of social media, because of, emphasis on maternal health, because of emphasis on mental health. So, yes, I did know a few people who had experienced miscarriage, but I don't think I understood the depth of their pain until I experienced it myself through losing baby R, through his stillbirth.
Yeah, I think feel the same way. Or I mean, I know I do that I just didn't understand how
Yeah.
horrible it is. You're like, oh, okay. All the things that people
Yeah,
think like, well, they weren't that far along, so it can't be that bad, or, things
exactly.
like that. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, how could you have ever thought that? But you just don't
Yeah.
know until
Yeah.
you've actually been there. So I
Yeah.
don't think most people are trying to be heartless. I
At
just think
all.
they don't get it.
Yes. I think people don't understand the loss of something that, like a pregnancy loss, is a loss of first birthday, a loss of a family vacation with four, a loss of da 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 da. It's not so much a loss of memories with this person, which is what a lot of people associate grief with. So it's hard to understand. And the people who are in this worst club, best people, really, I do think have become my closest allies and friends because they do get it.
Yeah, I agree. I love the lost community. I wish I
Me
had found
too.
it sooner after losing Jasmine. It took me a couple of years, but glad I have
Yeah.
it now.
Yeah. Really, really incredible people doing like really incredible work.
And it's so cool to see how each person does something a little different or focuses on a little bit different issue, but they're all doing really important things just in their own
Yeah,
like creative way.
that's right. Our little like corners of the world that we can, touch and hopefully connect. It's really incredible.
So when did you decide to try again after your loss?
So we were told medically you need to wait 6 months. I don't know if my midwife made that number up. I don't know if that's actually scientifically proven, but she said you need to wait 6 months. And I was tracking my ovulation using the calendar method, and I looked at the calendar and I was like, oh, okay, we're going to be on vacation. We'll just give it a go. There's no way I'll get pregnant on the first try. And then enter Drew. We didn't exactly try. I didn't exactly have a plan with my husband. I just said, let's give it a go because it'll never happen on the first try. And then it happened. And so it was really hard. Let me take this back. I know there are a lot of people who struggle to get pregnant that easy, quote unquote, that it's just like, oh, first try, lucky, lucky Jen and Eric. They're just so lucky. And truly, I did feel lucky. And also, I'm not quite sure I was ready to be pregnant that soon because I vividly remember telling my therapist, I just don't want to acknowledge that I'm pregnant until at least the year 2024 because 2023 was baby's year and I found out I was pregnant in 2023. I wanted to live through a holiday season and like just griefy and sad and not be like overly excited about this next pregnancy. So I did get pregnant at exactly 6 months and it still felt like not enough time. And I vividly remember saying, I'm not going to even acknowledge that I'm pregnant until the new year.
Mhm.
And my therapist was like, we can do that. But then in the new year, we do have to start thinking about what that looks like. And I was like, okay, okay. She's awesome. I can't say enough good things about having a great therapist on your side.
I love that. She's like, all right, I'll go with you for now, but we can't do this the whole time.
Exactly. Exactly. So I'm thankful we didn't have to try very hard to bring Drew here. That's not true. Let me rewind. Bringing Drew here was, I always mess up this word, but it was Hercules. Like it was a Herculean effort. We went to the doctor's office more times than I'm okay to admit, just because I'd be like, nope, I'm not feeling him. Take me to the hospital. Nope, I'm not feeling him. Take me to the hospital. And our hospital is 60 miles away because I didn't want to deliver at the hospital where I had baby R. I wanted to go into Boston, into the big city, into, a really, really state of the art labor and delivery unit. And so we ended up there in the month of May in 2024, there was only 4 nights we weren't at a doctor's office. 4 days, 4 nights, however you slice it. I just mentally, I could not imagine like getting to 36 weeks and then something going wrong. And so I would go every single day. And they let me. They totally let me. My new care team, they let me arrive to that labor and delivery unit as much as I wanted, and they were awesome.
You just on a first name basis with everyone.
Absolutely. The non-stress test was done in like a separate room with a few different techs, and they were, yeah, first name basis, hugs and kisses. When Drew was born, hugs and kisses. Like it was their baby too.
Think that's so amazing though, because we've talked a little bit about how you hear about all these horror stories or like all the ways that
Yeah.
things went wrong, and we don't often hear
Mhm.
about all the very supportive teams and caring
Yeah.
doctors because they are definitely out there, even if they can sometimes be
Yes.
hard to find. So
Absolutely. Yes. I actually was under the care of two MFMs because I just needed so much more support than anything, than reasonable. I needed more support than was reasonable. So I had two MFMs and they both had amazing care teams. They took really, really good care of me. The long-term vision would be to bring, a rainbow clinic or a pregnancy after loss clinic to the Boston Metro West area. Unfortunately, there isn't one that exists right now, but I'm thankful I was able to find two care teams that treated me, I think. They might tell you, we treat all of our patients this way, but I think they treated me above and beyond, if that makes sense.
yeah, that's definitely something I'd love to see in the Dallas area too, because we
Yeah,
don't have any that I know of. I did a search once and I didn't really see any in Texas at all. Like,
yeah.
and it's definitely something I think that's needed in every state because it's
Hmm.
just not the same as a regular pregnancy. It's just not.
It's just not. And it's just, if I was under a care team who said, Jen, you've been here every day for the past 6 days and made me feel 1% ashamed of that, I would be very, very, very sad and very traumatized by that. Thankfully, although I wasn't at a rainbow clinic, no one said that to me. They did not, they just kept saying, keep coming, keep coming. We're gonna get that baby here safe. You don't worry. Now, the problem is my husband and I are thinking about our next pregnancy. And with a living son who's a year old, I just don't know what we're going to do. And so it might be that we don't go to Boston for our next delivery. It might be that I find a whole new third care team. It's just really, really uncertain. And I think that's where support groups come into play. And I want to put a plug in for like how important support groups have played in my life, both like a stillbirth support group on Zoom, followed by a pregnant after loss support group. And now I'm part of a parenting after loss support group. And there is another support group that this organization that I actually am employed by runs that's it's called subsequent choices. What's your next step? What's your, let's talk about what's next for you. And it's just so important to have a space to chat with other people who've been in the same or very, very similar position as you.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the organization?
Yeah, so Empty Arms Bereavement Support is based out of Western Massachusetts. So my hometown is physically dead smack in the middle of the state. So an hour to Boston and an hour out to the Amherst area, if you've heard of UMass, that is in the western part of the state. That's where Empty Arms is. It's a very like liberal, very open arms type of place. I know that sounds funny because the name is Empty Arms, but it's very accepting. And I'm not talking about the organization, the entire like community of Western Mass is very like go with the flow type of like love everyone, daisies and, granola type people. So it's very different than Boston, which is like city, uptight, like by the books. And so it's interesting that in this tiny little state of Massachusetts, we have, both of these unique communities where if you go east, you've got true Bostonian cities type people. And then if you go western, you have these like very laid back and like just really chill type people. So after my loss, I had this horrible identity shift where I'm not a mom, but I am a mom. but I don't want to go work in the city, but what am I going to do? And so I ended up joining an empty arms support group and fell in love with it almost immediately after my loss. Unfortunately, the information that I was provided with at the hospital was just not great. It was, the sad folder of death that, I never even opened. And when I actually got home and was Googling and Googling and Googling at 2 a.m., like support groups, infant loss, parent needing support, I found Empty Arms through this like mad Google search. And I submitted an inquiry form, and the form literally reads, I went back and read it now that I'm an employee, and it says, I don't know what I need, but I know I need help. And I reached out, and the director, the founder said, I think you would benefit from joining our stillbirth and early infant loss support group. We meet on the fourth Wednesday of every month from 7 to 9 on Zoom. Here's the link if it sounds like something you might want to do. Come and join us. And I joined and I never left. I did end up going back to my executive assistant position, but when I was pregnant with Drew, I I was still working as an executive assistant within the back of my mind that I wasn't going to be able to sustain working in Boston, and how would that look and what would that look like with a living son and an infant who passed away. And so about 4 weeks before my maternity leave was set to end, I reached out to the director and said, by any chance, do you have room in your books for a part-time employee? And she said, I do. I have space. I can take you on my books. I'm in need of someone to help with this special project or these special projects. And just like that, I gave my notice at my previous employer, and I joined Empty Arms. And the thing that I want listeners to know about is that Empty Arms supports parents in three ways. Yes, I am working, on an operations on some special projects, but the main goals and the main things that Empty Arms does is support parents, one, at the bedside, two, after loss through support groups, and three, we do provider educations through professional development and CEU courses. We are an accredited bereavement education team. And so I think it's really unique that we support parents at the beds. It's this three-tiered system I think is really unique, especially the piece that's supporting parents at the bedside, where we are able to go into, we are approved and I guess as vendors to go into hospitals and sit with parents with their infant who has passed away and help them and hold them and bathe them and sing to them and show them that you don't have to rush out of the hospital. You can hold this little baby for, 12, 15, 24, 48 hours as long as you want. And we're here to show you how that looks because we know you have no idea what that looks like because we knew when our babies passed away that we had no idea what to do. And I so badly wish that I had delivered baby R at a hospital where Empty Arms parents were or the companion program was. But unfortunately, because I'm in a different part of the state, I didn't have a companion at my bedside. And I do think the hospital did the best they could, but this companion program is just miles above and knowing how to just love on that little infant for as long as you have them before you have to say goodbye.
I think that piece is amazing and so needed because I didn't have anybody either. And yeah, my nurses did the best they
The best
could.
they
And I
could.
think they were absolutely amazing. But, coming from parents who have been there themselves, that's just a whole other level of support. So that would be something that I wish could be in every hospital in the US.
I know. We're working now to bring pieces of the program to the other parts in Massachusetts, and it's 100 years away where we would have bedside support in every hospital, peer support. One, it takes a really unique parent to be able to go into the hospital and hold infants that have passed away. And truthfully, I am not a companion. I don't go into the hospitals myself. I think if my director ever asked me to be trained and shadow her on, some hospital visits, I would, but I haven't done it yet. So we'll get there eventually. And there's a plug that I hope to say that stillbirth rates will decrease. And so the need for people at the bedside will hopefully also decrease. That, of course, we can never take away 100% of miscarriages and terminations for medical reasons and stillbirths. Never will that ever be 100% eliminated. But instead of 21,000 stillbirths a year, might there only be 10,000? Yeah, I think so. In 100 years, that's the plug where we need, the advocacy work, driving the education of fetal monitoring, fetal movement monitoring, and the healthcare providers educating their patients has to come into play. So, while yes, I hope that there is a day where bereaved parents sit at the bedsides with all other bereaved parents so they're not alone, maybe it won't even be that needed, right? Pie in the sky,
That's a good goal. I like that goal.
right? Me too. I like thinking that one day the rates will decline and we will see the needle move.
And the organization does have some national groups as well.
Yes and no. So we nationally do reach parents for specific loss types. So let me take a step back. Empty Arms has 14 support groups monthly. Those support groups are very unique, purposeful support groups. So there's miscarriage. And we don't necessarily put definitions on each one of the support groups. We let parents decide, but we do have a miscarriage support group, a parenting after loss support group, a parenting older living children support group, which is unique. And the reason I say those ones that I've mentioned so far are close to the state of Massachusetts and truly those people who are within driving distance of our headquarters. So there are some folks who are in like Western New York that do join because they're actually closer to Empty Arms headquarters than like me in Central Mass. But the national reach that we have is for very specific populations who might not have the support that they need in their own state or county. And that would be Black, Indigenous people of color support group, LGBTQ support group, and then termination for medical loss support group. So if there are any persons who are listening to the support group and fall in one of those three categories anywhere in the country, they are welcome to join our virtual support groups monthly and get support with other peers, whether they're here, there, California, Massachusetts, Florida, Montana, doesn't matter.
I think that's awesome. I love that, you have it for those specific groups that, because I feel like you can find miscarriage groups, stillbirth groups, things like that. But the
Yeah.
ones you mentioned are a lot harder to find that kind of support, especially in some states that don't always support these things.
That's right. That's right. And that's why our director was very strategic and very thoughtful in saying we are close to mostly the state of Massachusetts, except we know there are people who need support and the need is there. And the numbers, of people attending our support group shows that the need is there for the national reach on those three specific support groups.
So, is there anything else that you'd like to share or add or talk about?
I could talk about Baby R for hours upon hours upon hours. I'm really thankful to learn and to meet other parents who are going through, their really darkest days. And what I think I'd like to leave people with is I was telling you before we turned on the recording that very early in my grief days, I learned about this analogy that you carry your grief. And if you picture it as a stone in your pocket, that stone starts out very large and very sharp and very painful. And every time you put your hand in your pocket, which is a million times a day, it hurts and it pokes you and it doesn't feel great. And it's the only thing you can feel in your pocket. And as days and months go on, that stone, the edges begin to soften, just like as if you were a stone, on the edge of the water, it gets rubbed down from your hand touching it and holding it and touching it and holding it. And then you don't put your hands in your pockets as many times because you know it's there, but it doesn't hurt to touch it. It doesn't hurt to carry it. It's actually a smaller stone. It might feel a lot different. And that my very first support group, somebody said, I'm here to tell you that 2 weeks looks a lot different than 2 months. And that sure as hell looks a lot different than 2 years. And so whenever I speak about Baby R, I do say that 2 years feels a lot differently than 2 weeks did. And those really early days are were really hard for me, and I'm okay. And that stone in my pocket doesn't hurt every time I touch it. And I love speaking about Baby R. And I think that there's purpose and plans behind his life and his death. And I'm really thankful to have shared a piece of my story with you today.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing everything with us.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks, Sarah.
Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please take a moment to leave a positive review or rating on Apple or Spotify. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.